Hi, welcome to today's episode of the Perfume Preppy, where we talk about all things fragrance. Before we get started, be sure to click like and subscribe. That way you get notifications whenever new content is posted. And without further ado, let's get started. So today's episode is going to be a little bit of a refresher if you're a previous subscriber, but it also is going to have some new tips if you're someone who's new to my channel. So first things first, as I said last week, I had planned on actually posting this video, but I was still kind of recovering from a work trip I was on. Wonderful trip, met great people, got to do a lot of amazing work, but I was very tired. So today I'm actually going to be, like I said, be talking about a bit of a refresher. But while I was there, I did get to talk about fragrance because, of course. And one of the things that came up is the right and wrong way to apply fragrance. So if you've been watching my channel, I actually talk about this in a previous video, and I talk about, I think it's called the do's and don'ts of fragrance. And so what I talk about is how usually most people, including myself, are taught to apply fragrance where you spray it and then you do this, right? Which is the worst way to apply fragrance, because what that does is it distorts the top note because the oil from your skin is being rubbed in to that fragrance, and it alters the fragrance altogether. The only second worst way to apply fragrance is by spraying it on your clothes. And the reason for that is because a lot of fragrances are not transparent. So when you spray them, it stains your clothes. This happened to me when I was in high school. I didn't realize because the bottle wasn't clear, and I didn't realize that the fragrance was like a light brown, and I sprayed it on a white shirt, and I couldn't get that out for the life of me. I bleached it and everything, and it still didn't come out. I just ended up throwing the shirt away. So, save yourself the trouble of having to get rid of clothes. Just don't do it. And while we're on the subject of notes and things like that, so every fragrance has three notes. It has the top note, it has the heart or middle note, and then it has the base note. So when the top note evaporates, the middle note is what emerges. So that's what you oftentimes are smelling when you have on a fragrance. So one example that comes to mind, because I was at Ulta 2 days ago and I just saw it, is Carolina Herrera's Good Girl, like the original one, the one that looks like the blue shoe, the blue high heel. So I believe the middle notes of that one are tonka bean and vanilla, or they have tonka bean and vanilla in it. So that's why when you smell a tester of that vanilla is very prominent in it, and so is the tonka bean, because those are the heart notes. So like I said, the top notes are going to be the things that, obviously it's the first layer of fragrance, but when that evaporates, that's what you're going to smell next, is that middle note, right? That's what emerges. But the base note tends to be richer fragrances, and that's what's going to linger longer and give the fragrance a lot more depth to it. You may have also heard me talk about on this channel how, for whatever reason, patchouli scents and my body just don't agree. If patchouli is in the top or the heart note, it reeks on me. It just smells awful. I've smelled a couple fragrances, and I've even worn a couple fragrances where patchouli is the base note, one of the base notes, not the base note, but one of them. And because of the top and the heart notes and the other base notes, that particular fragrance doesn't look bad on, or doesn't look bad, but doesn't smell bad on me, because it overpowers that patchouli, which normally doesn't work well with me, right? So, but usually, yeah, the base notes, that's what's going to give the fragrance kind of its bottom, give it its depth. So while we're talking about that kind of thing, and the base, not the base, excuse me, the heart notes emerging, a lot of that is because the top notes, as I said, they evaporate. Now, we're coming up on summer. Even today is pretty warm where I am in Michigan, but heat causes fragrances to bloom. So what that means is that it makes your top notes to your fragrances evaporate faster, and it makes those heart notes a lot more vibrant. Meaning that, if you normally, like say every other time of year, you spray that perfume, you might not maybe smell that base note until the heart note, until maybe like about 45 minutes to an hour or so in. If it's hot outside, yeah, that number's going to change, because that top note is now evaporating and the base note is what's going to emerge fastest. So when people talk about a fragrance blooming, that's what they're referring to. Now, conversely, in the wintertime, like I said, once again, I'm in Michigan, so it gets really cold here. So if you have a fragrance where you really like the top notes and you kind of want that to last a little bit longer, winter's perfect for whatever fragrance that is, because because of how cold it is, it causes causes the top notes to evaporate slower. So a lot of times you'll hear people say, oh, I don't like such and such a fragrance because it wears out too fast. It's not that it's wearing out, it's evaporating, right? And that could be from external heat, or it could even be from your body temperature. So also, I'm going to link in the description a printable PDF. And what this PDF does is it shows the heat spots for both men and women side by side. And so on your body, you have heat spots that are high in heat, medium in heat, low in heat, right? So if you don't necessarily want your fragrance evaporating that fast, then you would want to spray it in a low to medium heat area on your body. And those pulse points are different for both men and women, right? Women tend to carry a lot of heat in their chest, men not so much. But like I said, I'll link that in the description so that, if you'd like to print it off or even just to see it, you'll have a link to it. So also, while we're talking about temperature, exposure to air and sunlight, as I said, we're coming up on summer, so people will probably be outside a lot more to, just kind of go out. But that can kind of cause a shift in the scent of the fragrance, not just in the sense that it blooms, but the overall chemistry. I think a lot of times when we talk about perfume, we really don't think about the science that's behind it, but there are people that, go to school to become, experts in perfume or even to, formulate fragrances. I think they're called perfumiers. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's the term. Because sometimes if they're talking about a particular fragrance, they'll say the perfumier, the nose behind that scent is this person, right? So, like especially when fashion houses are launching fragrances like Chanel No. 5, and that particular fragrance was really innovative and iconic because fashion houses at that time were not releasing fragrances. Chanel was kind of a pioneer in that. So people who study this and who do this, they really have to understand the chemistry behind it. As once again, I'm looking for my notes. Anyone who also has watched this channel knows I'm a big fan of having notes. So also another factor that has to do with the scent of a fragrance, you heard me talk about how patchouli doesn't break down on me. Your pH balance has a lot to do with that in addition to your body heat. First of all, every part of your body, your skin has different pH balances, right? So, which explains why two people can put on the same fragrance and it smells completely different. I remember one time my friend and I were at the mall shopping and we went into a department store around Christmas time and they're trying to get you to buy those gift sets, they're trying to get you to buy a fragrance, something. But they're mostly trying to get you to buy the gift set. So, I forget what fragrance it was, but we both sprayed it on. Smelled fine on me, smelled awful on her. Like we went to the bathroom and she had to scrub her wrist. It was really bad. But it's because everybody's body breaks down fragrances differently, right? Like your skin breaks it down differently. So and also, like I said, depending upon where you're spraying it at, temperature. Some people are warmer than others. I tend to be cold. So in the summertime, perfume is still gonna evaporate on me the same, but areas of my body may not get as warm as someone who just is always warm all the time. So that's something to consider as well. Also, so on a final note, in one of my previous videos, I mentioned that if you're going to be smelling fragrances that day, just for yourself or if you're buying a gift for somebody, check to see if that place has coffee so that you can kind of cleanse your nose and kind of get yourself back together. Because if you smell like over 3 or 4 fragrances, your nose is pretty much done for a while. So I always suggest that you use coffee. Now, recently I found out that, not to say that you can't still use coffee, but a better option is to, especially if you know you're going to be smelling fragrances, have a tissue with you. That way you can kind of put it up to your nose and just kind of like get your nose back together, because the tissue, obviously an unscented tissue, do that. And the reason for it is because even though coffee does tend to clear everything out, because coffee tends to be very bitter, when you smell other fragrances after you use the coffee and then you smell it, what happens is sometimes it pulls the more bitter notes out of the other fragrances that you're smelling. So it might distort your perception on how that scent smells. So you might say, oh, I don't like that. That had a very, bitter or sour smell to it. I don't like it. And it's not so much that, it's that your nose is still holding on to the coffee a bit. So what I would say is use the tissue. Now, if you don't have a tissue on you and you're at Ulta and Sephora, because I know they have coffee, I know Ulta in particular does. What I would say then is still use the coffee, but instead of going right back to smelling a fragrance, like maybe give yourself 30 seconds to a minute and just kind of like, go the next aisle over when you're away from the fragrances and give your nose time to kind of aerate and get itself, back together. So that way you can kind of smell these fragrances with like a fresh, palette, and really smell them the way that they're intended to be smelled. Because, if you hold on to those bitter notes, like I said, it's going to distort your perception of how that smells. So those are my tips and tricks for the day. As I said, I will be linking that PDF in the description. So thank you for tuning in and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.